Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel. I'm Birds View Politics, and in this video we're going to be covering the last few weeks of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So let's get into it. First, we now know that Ukraine has claimed that the commander of Russia's Black Sea Fleet was killed in a Sevastopol attack. Now, Sevastopol is the capital of Crimea, which is currently Russian occupied in the south of the country, and Ukraine saying they've just gone and just killed the commander of Russia's major fleet in that region is, of course, major news. Usually, you don't see countries targeting the leaders of another military, unless, of course, you're talking about terrorists, where the United States has done that in the past. But mostly, Ukraine has refrained from overtly attacking a commander of a major military group. They didn't try and assassinate Yevgeny Prigozhin, for example. They didn't try and assassinate Vladimir Putin or Sergei Shoigu or any of the other major Russian higher-ups until now, when they killed this commander of the Russian Black Sea Fleet, which certainly would indicate that they're preparing to potentially attack Crimea, which has been Russian controlled since 2014 when they annexed the state away from Ukraine. Now, it's important to note that Ukraine saying they've killed this commander is a major step in almost an escalation from Ukraine. However, Ukraine has been slowly but surely acting more brazen in their attempts to try and reestablish some sort of initiative. Earlier in the war, we saw them retake entire regions. We saw them retake Kharkiv. We saw them retake the city of Kherson as well as much of the West Bank of the Dnieper River in Kherson, and now they've had this spring offensive that has been going for a very long time now. We're in September, we're heading towards winter, the roads are going to be deteriorating, it's going to be very hard to make substantial offensive warfare. And we're going to be, once again, waiting for next spring, and Ukraine really hasn't accomplished too much since then. And Ukraine has been really trying to figure out a way to establish an initiative so that they can once again go on these offensives, retaking whole oblasts and potentially forcing the Russians to move out of Ukraine altogether. So this is a major escalation. However, it wasn't all good news for Ukraine in the past few weeks, because we also had the Polish Prime Minister saying that they would not provide any more military weapons to Ukraine, and this was in the aftermath of a ban on Ukrainian grain, which was initially put in place by the EU to protect European farmers who had been getting hurt by the lowly priced Ukrainian grain making its way into the grain market in Europe, and then those who were purchasing grain would be more likely to buy Ukrainian grain rather than grain from their own countries. And when they announced plans to end the ban, Poland, alongside Hungary and Slovakia, said that they would continue with it, which had a lot of protests from Ukraine. And Zelensky later held a major speech at the United Nations. Now, Hungary has been known for being one of the most pro-Russian, if not the most pro-Russian state in the EU. Slovakia looks likely to elect a pro-Russian leader in the upcoming elections in that country. However, Poland has always been extremely hawkish on Russia. They've never really had any qualms about fighting Russia through proxy, especially when it comes to Ukraine. They've been one of Ukraine's biggest backers, and they've been one of the biggest backers of increased military spending, and especially Poland's currently right-wing government has tended to spend a lot more on the military than, say, France or Germany or other countries in the EU. However, Poland is also very protective of its farmers, and so when Ukrainian grain started making its way into Poland and it was very cheap, Poland immediately was angered by this, and Zelensky's comments in the UN drew a strong protest from Poland, and then they said that they would no longer transfer weapons to Ukraine because we are now arming Poland. Now, really, that just meant they weren't transferring weapons to Ukraine. And the president actually later said that they were interpreted in the worst possible way, and the president and prime minister are of the same right-wing party, and they said that the older weapon systems that Poland says is not necessary for modernizing its own military could still be shipped to Ukraine, but they're not going to be giving them new weapons of any kind, and that, of course, is a big major change in the war, which is going to be very harmful to the Ukrainian war effort. Meanwhile, Hungary said that they would not favor any more sanctions against Russia because, and this is an idea that is increasingly popular in Europe, especially on the right, more Russophilic wing of right-wing politics in Europe, but also on the Russophilic left wing of politics, where they said that new sanctions against Russia are needed not because they want to help Russia, but because they cause more harm to Europe than Russia. And this is really very debatable. Of course, it begs the question, how much are these European countries willing to sacrifice in order to hurt Russia's economy, prevent it from continuing to fund its military at the levels that it has been in the past? And so this is just an escalation in Ukraine trying to hold together its Western allies, who are increasingly swinging back and forth between heavy support for Ukraine and more moderate or even lack of support, as we've seen in Hungary. This also comes, the United States is currently about to enter a government shutdown due to failing to pass a budget, and this budget has been tried to pass by the current Republicans, the right wing in the United States, and they've been trying to pass this budget that would continue to fund the military, even increase funding for the military. However, many on the right wing of the Republican Party tend to be more isolationist, and this leads to them voting against it. So there is really going to be a question of how much the United States can continue to give Ukraine military aid, while the United States itself is probably going to be in the midst of a government shutdown by the end of this week. Now, Ukraine has made some advances on the ground. If you see here, in June, we really didn't see much progress. The Ukrainians had just kind of been probing around the Russian positions, and this was in the midst of what was supposed to be a major spring offensive, now reaching into summer. However, they finally made a breakthrough this past week. They took the town of Robotnya, and they have actually been making substantial progress to the south. Now, this is just a mini-map, but you can see they've broken through this one defensive line just north of Robotnya, and they are now heading south. And on the larger map, you can see the opportunity this opens because Ukraine has also been making advances to the east of that. They've even been getting closer to Pavlivka and also Marfapil, and if they were able to take those two cities, that would enable them to do a broad push south towards this key railway. Now, the railway is really the main way that Russia has continued to supply their military, and the main areas of Russia's counterattacks in recent weeks has actually been in the far north and east of Ukraine over here. And they have been trying to retake this key railway line that runs through Kupiansk, and Russia's actually been pretty successful, although it's been very small gains relative to what Ukraine has been making. The Russians weren't really expected to launch any major offensive until next year, so them continuing to establish more and more control over this key rail line is allowing them to ship more and more military goods to the more contested areas of the front. And this railway runs all the way through the industrialized areas of Luhansk, western Luhansk, and also through eastern and northern Donetsk. And that is, once again, going to be absolutely crucial for maintaining any Russian control in that region. So, that's the recent news from the last month of the war in Ukraine. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.